And I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown bring me round again to find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man. Dum da dum da dum da dum. Let's see. Can we get the top tank over here clear out along that so as it can be, what's that word? Visible. Yes, visible. Yeah, I think we can do that. Thinking about converting this into a frag tank. Just doing away with the reef. Because there's just too much damn chalupa. I'm sorry, Turbinaria. I'll rescue you later.
Oh yeah, that's much better.
So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whatever it is, wherever you are. As for me, it's morning the sequel. I took like a little nap. Got done with my last stream at about, what was it, 4 o'clock in the morning. Fell asleep watching TV about 6. Woke up around 7. To some rather tasty coffee. That's always good. And I was scrolling through the news on YouTube and watching this wonderful expose that the New York Times is doing. Don't get me confused with hating on the New York Times. New York Times does some of the most credible reporting, but even they show signs of having some sort of influence somewhere. Someone was compromised, at least at the point where they decided to not report on Trump and did report on Clinton. Why? Because Russia. That's why. Well, I was looking through the different news of the day and found their last installment of this, or their latest installment of this little thing called Infektion. Infektion with a K, just how I spell it. And it's named after one of the things that they report about, which is a Soviet operation to convince people that the CIA was behind AIDS. And to this day, people are still saying this shit. Kanye West. In fact, it seems like the black people that are associated with Trump seem to want to say this. Interesting. Just coincidence, I suppose. Just, even a couple examples that they cited happen to be people associated with Trump. Huh. As if there was some sort of Medianite empire that had established itself secondary to our government or something. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have been saying that shit for the past fucking 4 years? Oh yeah, that was me. But this little expose they have, quite typical of the usual work. You know, they may be compromised, but usually they do some of the best reporting out there. Especially as far as typed up, sourced, that kind of work. And I think if it comes to some sort of an editorial board meeting, people there finally started making a hubbub about not releasing the shit about Russia. Because I'm sure whoever there was trying to cover Russia's ass must have been protesting this one, because this is a great expose. They even have a clip of Yuri Bezmenov on there. Isn't that something? I think that's fascinating. Good job, New York Times. They even talk about in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the reporter who organized this little report happened to be familiar with me in some way because of how far back he goes into this whole thing, which is indicated by him saying the same thing that I've been saying about how I didn't need to be reincarnated to notice this shit. I was supporting Ukraine and noticed this shit and learned from them exactly what the Russians were up to. And it all seemed very familiar to me, and that's what got me digging into history. Like, my instincts are telling me that this has been happening every 100 years for a long, long time. And that there came a time when humans thought that it was over and that they didn't need me anymore, and that surely they wouldn't break down and back into the same old cycle. And now my memory can't tell the difference between 1,000 years ago and 2,400 years ago. I've studied history my whole life, and to try to break through what you've learned in your life and remember things that happened before your earliest, vaguest memories in childhood, it's a bit of a challenge. So you only really have instincts that could guide you to the occasional flash, and then you have to try to understand what that flash is. But at the same time, you have to consciously catalog and avoid anything you've ever seen in movies or imagined while reading a book. But I noticed some patterns that went well beyond what most people from Ukraine were even discussing. When I discussed it with them, they were willing to acknowledge that their histories backed it up as far as targeting of religion, as far as taking slaves, as far as taking entire ethnic groups and just carting them off, as far as child exploitation. Now, just 100 years ago, it was a big wave of anti-Semitism. But the main thing that echoed in me, that seemed familiar, about not just the particular targeting, the way they went about things, their tactics, their attitude. It was the way they bullshit. Now, let me just say, as an exorcist, you come to recognize behavioral patterns in people as being indicative of lingering demon possessions. Now, if you think it's a big deal to be demon possessed, just let go of that idea altogether. Chances are you're possessed by at least 17 demons. The typical number for anyone who does not maintain a constant state of prayer is either 17 or 23. Very rarely will it be any of the numbers in between, and never will it be any number lower or higher. These are numbers that enhance the objectives of those energies. It's the only way I can really explain it. We'll talk about atomic energies later, and maybe that'll help me explain it. Well, you know, if you knew what I knew, and you were in command of the Russian FSB, for instance, technically, according to the laws of the fabric of the reality that exists today, you could create a demon. Now, bear in mind, according to the world that's been reformed recently, demons are no longer demons per se. Most of them are in human bodies. What remains of them, and that still affect you the same way, I refer to as echoes. But you'd be more appropriately comprehending them as a Xerox copy of the program of a demon that was then reinstalled into the new operating system of the universe, but without sentience or, well, technically, they're not rebelling. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to. But they have to exist, unfortunately, for now. However, their originals have the option for redemption. It's kind of the why, if you were wondering. Now, regardless of whether you're talking about pre-2011 or now, what a demon essentially is a malfunction. Okay? It's something that a human shouldn't have evolved to think or do. Okay? It's something that appears like an instinct, can be programmed and enhanced through information warfare, and gives people the tendency to act illogically. Now, there are many different terms for demons and things like that, especially from different languages and perspectives, but when it comes to the point of view of an exorcist, that's what you're exercising. You're exercising a vibration that connects that person to the origin of a bad habit. Now, in this case, it connects them to an echo of the origin of a bad habit. But to better understand it, you have to consider the old world in which they were connected to the first being that committed that sin. Whether it be cheating somebody out of something or cheating on someone. Okay? The first people were named for and considered themselves as, and therefore were basically, manifestations of their invention. And in the first days, it would be a matter of being basically judged and named as such. You would be called son of blah blah blah, or second son of blah blah blah, daughter of, or second daughter, third daughter, and so on, of blah blah blah, until you earned your name. Does that sound, I mean, that should sound familiar on some level. There might even still be some cultures who resemble that. That'd be cool. I wonder what else they have hidden in them. But you can look around at a lot of ancient cultures and find a lot of things hidden, can't you? A lot of things that seem to connect things and events, symbols, beliefs, people even. All around a time period about 2 ago. And until the age of information just recently. That time, about 2,000 years ago. And other than basically the Romans, the general, activities of history have been kind of left up to guesswork, left up to people sifting through shit after the fact and finding this and that, and so many archaeologists and historians and people like that are Russians and people from various stands where known communist recruiting activity was taking place. I was just watching this historian talk about this image of Buddha that I have, hopefully, as the icon of this video. An image of Buddha, supposedly. Greek toga, he's standing by Greek or possibly Phoenician pillars. But it's Buddha. Looks familiar to me, the face. Looks like somebody I gave it a nickname to. I can't remember. Hezekiah, Zechariah, something like that. And I nicknamed him Jerubal. I think I named him Jerubal. I think that's where the name Paul comes from, not Saul. I mean, like, I see this guy's face and I remember him clearly. I remember not being tell where he worked for logically. And so I kind of let my instincts decide. You know? He kind of looked a little bit like this. Let me show you his face. Of course, there's a fucking kitten on my lap. Oh. This is the earliest known image of Buddha. Period. They said. The London Museum says. Now, notice the detail work on this. It's all pretty fine, right? And you see that there. Look at these fingers. Fingers look like they've been gashed, similar to this gash here. That's fucking damage. Looks like the fingers have been altered. I would guess, judging from how that's been worn away right there and how this goes across, this gesture right here. This was a Christ impersonator. With, might I add, very thick Moabite blood. Jerubel. It's Paul, the serpent-tongued. My friends. My friends. I saw this one kind of a feminized version of him. Could have been related some roundabout way. Preaching in this lifetime. He was one of those traveling preachers. And the reason why I say the my friends thing is because this guy, he had the lizard lisp and everything. And he had the back and forth kind of talking. But he was like a little skinny guy. And just the rhythm and the fake you know, and it's just the rhetorical nonsense. Just preaching hollowness and preaching about, you know, the miracles that are done because people believe in this rhetoric, and to keep these miracles happening, we're going to pass around the altar plate or whatever. We're going to pass around the thing that, for absolutely no blasphemously mocking reason, looks like the platter that Salome received the head of John the Baptist on, that was painted as being the first Holy Grail. Yeah, that's right. The first known painting of the Holy Grail is not a fucking cup, it's a platter. And you pass around little plates and put money in them now. It's just charming. This is the level of blindness that it takes to have a movie series called The Left Behind. And it has the Antichrist. It's a little bald guy who's in charge of Russia. And then all the right-wing conspiracy people who have all seen the Left Behind movies do not connect the dots. But I'm sure they think they're good Christians because they put money in that offering plate every Sunday. After all, them traveling people who said they used to be Jews, oh, they're extra special Christians because they were Jews and then they converted. Maybe they were never Jews to begin with. Maybe they used that as a platform because the worst that could happen is if you found out that they were bullshitting you, you'd just wind up being anti-Semitic. And, oh, gee, Russia has never used anti-Semitism to their advantage. So there's the first known image. And the lady seems like a nice girl, perfectly nice girl. Speaks with a normal British sounding voice. Looks of probably mixed Pakistani Indian descent. Then again, not exactly, like, there should be much differentiation in those people. That's all been forced upon them. Well, she said that this artifact was found along the Silk Road in northern India. Towards Pakistan. And she was talking about the ruins and the culture that existed there, and like the history of Buddhism there and stuff like that. And she mentioned that it all, what did she say? She said it all just disappeared around 1100. You mean when they were being invaded by the Caliphate? Wasn't it Timberlane? Somebody like that? Or was it Genghis Khan himself? I think he went in there and killed a bunch of fucking people for a while. She's supposed to be a historian. And she's already just acting like most of the traces of that holy sacred area, and it is, was destroyed by an army of religious morons. She didn't mention that. And I bet you she would be very uncomfortable talking about the different communist-backed gurus that have been set up since the 1960s and 70s there in that same area where they found this oldest Buddha. That looks kind of like a Bedouin. Looks a little Asian. Little. Doesn't look Indian. It looks like a very particular set of genetics that can now be found in Syria, the Middle East, Syria and Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Greece, Moldova, Eastern Europe. And like I said, it's very detailed sculpting until you get to where the hand is. The hand looks like somebody cut it and then tried to make it look natural, but they weren't able to make the pinky look right. So the cutting quality and the short length of the pinky being equal to the other knuckles kind of gives it away. But it's very simple to take away material from a sculpture. It's very simple to edit and change something when you're not adding material. And that's all that's been done to that. Now, I have no doubt that whoever this man was, he might have went to Asia. The particular gentleman that I'm remembering sold things like that. He sold artifacts. And when I had confronted him later, he had made a habit of intentionally sending people ahead of him to tell of the healing powers that he had. And then he would come in this little cart. It almost looks like him sitting in it right there. The way his arm's sitting like that. Very bizarre. But anyways, so that AIDS rumor you know that made it into a local Indian newspaper back then in the 70s? It was owned by Russia, that Indian local newspaper called The Patriot. Yeah, The Patriot, as in they were going after the Indians who could speak English. There is an ever-decreasing number. The further back you go, the more there were. It's been a sort of a traditionalist revival that's had less and less of the percentage of the population in India being taught English. Which, you know, has its effects on customer service quality. But there has been a lot of coordination between certain groups in lots of different countries with Russian disinformation. And historically, it has done a lot to counteracted by, say, for instance, the United States intelligence services, because we don't have state religion. So when it comes to that, it's not only not their job to counteract it, technically, but it's something that they consider it their duty to steer clear from because of the religious implications. It's kind of like a prime directive when it comes to religion, almost. However, the fact that it is governments, it's state disinformation that it's been targeting religion for so long, it is simply not right or legal for governments to not get involved. The government has an obligation to protect its citizens. If citizens have their religion being attacked by foreign powers, the government has to protect the religion, not just keep the people from being killed, okay, but keep their religion from being attacked by lies that destroy that religion from within and turn it from a force for good that actually turns people into better citizens into a way for a few people to get private jets. Oh, the kitten. Put his paws on my arm. You're so freaking sweet. Little shit. So anyways, wonder how my battery's doing here. I want to get my notebook out and talk about some physicsy type stuff. First, I'm going to let y'all look at the fish tanks for a little while, because I gotta organize. First, I need to get the kitten off of me. Oh, you're such a... Apparently my signal has gone to shit or something. I don't know. If anybody was watching, I would ask them if it's back yet. I guess I'll, maybe quitting the YouTube app will help. Alright. I guess I don't necessarily need to draw this. So I had this initial impression about something, and I thought I had figured it out. But I was trying to get away from alternate dimensions and shit. So just consider it beyond like imaginary comprehension, and basically just figured it was up to the math to show that it worked, as far as the way the waveforms flux and cause resonance and eject particles as resonant waves. But what I'd mentioned in the beginning about the negative and positive being the result of flux towards and away from 0-point modulation, I think they took, what is it, the funny guy on the channel, Silence Asylum, the way he explained the double slit experiment got me thinking about this again. And he stated it rather eloquently. The wave, if I may turn the camera back around, the wave occurs in the same pattern when one fired at a time. Because one is firing at the same time. And that kind of sounds bizarre. It like almost, does that prove that there is a parallel dimension, a parallel universe? Now, I think it's simply a matter of this being equidistant and the scale so small. So it's a wave, one at a time, that resolves. But that wave is actually coming through both of these. It's not a single particle. It's a wave. That's what that proves. It doesn't rule out the possibility of 0-point modulation in the center of an atom. But if it's a wave, that doesn't need to be the case. However, where they come into their dilemma is when they try to put sensors right here to see if the sensor's there and they fire this one, it goes through there and then goes through there and then it winds up on the wall. All that tells me is that the sensor is straightening it out. So what you have is a magnetic conduit, basically. But I really want that whole 0-point modulation thing to be true. I want there to be another dimension. I can just see logically why that doesn't mean that there is one. It's not necessarily. It's a particle. And while you're firing one, for some reason in another dimension, they happen to be firing the other one at the same time, right? That's implying a very complex solution. Occam's razor. The most simple explanation. If something goes through two holes, it's not a wave. I mean, it's not a particle, it's a wave. And if it resolves as something that seems to be equivalent to a particle, then what you've measured as particles are waves. And it's been resolved into that particle because that's where the wave conducted to. However, if there is some further indication of transference between this dimension and a parallel dimension, I would consider that to be quite logical. In that the most likely scenario would be a parallel universe with matter like essentially all exactly in the same place, so that non-corporeal beings, energy state beings, might be able to freely move around there, but I don't see how anything else could be different. It's very much similar to the holographic reality theory, I suppose. But anyways, I just wanted to clear up that confusion, but I don't think it's really cleared much up. So, it doesn't look like anybody's joining. It doesn't look like I'm gonna have much else to talk about. I want to talk about compromise and how active measures don't need to go back too far to be affecting our perception of a large portion of history. Okay. But I'm still geeking out about this stuff, and it's fun to think about. So I wanted to share some more thoughts on it, because the causality involved in the vibration or resonant flux of an atom could be the result of zero-point modulation indicating parallel universes. That'd be cool and everything. I don't think it's entirely necessary, though. I think there's, as this is going in, it's positive. As this is going out, it's negative. That positive attracts this negative, that negative attracts this positive, and it balances out like basically a little mini orbital. Okay, and these little vibrational orbitals of pure causality. It's basically creation energy vibrating at a frequency. That determines its program properties. And it seems to me like as long as that charge, as infinitesimally small as it is, as long as it is perfectly balanced, there's no problem. And it seems to me that it's low and equal frequencies can manipulate these units as groups, but it takes an extremely high, correct, and focused frequency to manipulate an individual or to break the bonds of a group. Anyways, what it means is nuclear weapons are a hell of a lot more plausible and probably a lot easier to make than people think. That's kind of scary. But anyways, I gotta go get something to eat, so I guess I'll end this broadcast at an hour. Hope y'all are having a good holiday. All's quiet in the house right now. It's kind of lovely. Peace, y'all. Click the like button. Thanks for watching. If,